this video I would like to talk about this camera. It's the LX100 from Panasonic Lumix, and it's been a while since this camera is out, and it's also been a while since I got this camera, but never really had a chance to properly do a video of it, simply because I always wanted to compare this to my G7, which is what I'm using to record me right now. And the reason why I always wanted to do a comparison, or at least do side-by-side test, is because the reason I bought these two cameras, the G7 and the LX100, is because of its headline feature. It's the 4K recording. And I'll talk about that later on in the video. So in this video I would like to talk about both photography and filmmaking side from both cameras. So there are both different types of cameras. The G7 is the mirrorless micro four thirds sensor camera, so it has the interchangeable lens system compared to this is a compact camera, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So this camera has a lot of features that allows you to do a lot of manual control, such as your aperture, your shutter, exposure compensation, as well as your ISO. Yeah, so it does have a lot of things to control. It's not like the camera's going to do the thinking for you, though you can put it in that way. And obviously you have this ring here, which can be function as a zoom option or the manual focus option. That said though, I turn off the manual focus option and only use it as a zoom because it's very, very, very slow. It's focused by a wire, just like most of the Panasonic as well as Olympus lenses for the micro four thirds system, which is super annoying because their focus by wire is just not accurate at all as compared to a real mechanical focus, unless if they were somehow to make it as reliable as the focus by wire that's found on the L lenses, on some of the L lenses from Canon. That would be nice. But even some of the Canon STM lenses that's focused by wire is also not as accurate as some of the L lenses that uses focus by wire system. Anyway, on photography side of things, this camera has 12 megapixel on a 16 megapixel sensor. So the reason they did that was just because they wanted the resolution to be the same on every single aspect ratio that you shoot with, that you can choose from up here on top of the lens. And the lens is actually a really nice designed lens by Leica. So I don't know, it's a really, really sharp lens. It's definitely a lot sharper than what you get with the 14 to 42 kit lens from Panasonic. Much, much sharper. I would go as far as saying sharper than some other primes from Panasonic. I haven't tried any primes from Olympus yet that would fit on the micro four thirds system, but definitely faster than some other primes, say 17mm, the 25mm f1.7, things like that. It's definitely sharper in many situations. That said, the flaring on this lens though it's okay. It's not the worst, but it's also not best looking. But then again, I'm coming from the DSLR point of view. My standard lenses on what I use on daily basis with my DSLR are L lenses. So those lenses are supposed to be well controlled with flaring, with sharpness, color fringing, all the other things that you would find a lot more on compact cameras. It's definitely very, very nicely controlled compared to many other compact cameras that I've used and experienced before. So that's a nice thing. Then there's the RAW files and the JPEGs. What I definitely noticed out of this camera, it has a 4/3 sensor, by the way. What I noticed from this camera is the JPEG definitely has a lot more dynamic range right out of the camera than the RAW, but the RAW files, obviously being the RAW file, it's made for post-processing anyway, so you can pull all the information you want later in post. But if you don't want to do anything in post, shooting in RAW will not really disappoint you, but shooting in JPEG will also not disappoint you, as it gives you a lot more dynamic range out of the camera right away when you preview it on your computer screen. With the RAW, you kind of need to pull them back later in post. And this is actually different to what is going on with my G7. So at least with a copy of my G7, it's the other way around. So you definitely find a lot more information, well, a lot more dynamic range out of the RAW files without doing any post-editing, post-processing. So you definitely see more in the highlights as well as in the shadows. And the RAW files tend to look a little bit more pleasing on the G7, in my opinion, whereas the JPEGs will look mostly 80% to 90% of the time more pleasing than the RAW files out of this camera, which is to be expected. The RAW usually is a really flat, dull looking file anyway. But yeah, so it also fits the purpose why it should be a compact camera, because most people will tend to shoot with JPEGs than RAW anyway, and having such a good looking JPEG means that, you know, it's more pleasing to look at, and it's, you know, tempting to share them, let's say on social network, say Facebook, Facebook, Instagram, things like that. So yeah, and being 12 megapixel, at first it kind of concerns me a little, as I'm fine with any pictures that's a little bit over 18 or 20 megapixel like bar line. So 18 is pretty okay, 20 megapixel is actually pretty good for me. But being 12 megapixel, at first I was very, very skeptical, but being a compact camera, I never took it seriously. I only take it out to take simple travel pictures, but I also want some good images, and the sharp lens really complements the sensor with it. So having sharp images as well as fast lens, so it goes to f1.7 variable to f2.8. It's actually a really nice camera to use, and I was not really worried about the megapixel anymore, as it turns out I never really use it for anything serious. I only put it on Instagram, or send it to friends, the pictures, or just have it on the smartphone. I never really like do a poster print or a proper A3 print, like A3 detailed prints with this camera. Though I think you can kind of get away with a normal A3 print, I would just say an A4 print would be okay if you're a little bit skeptical about the prints. But if you're just a casual person who would like to have their pictures print, then A3 would also be just fine. There's no built-in flash on this camera, so there's obviously the flash that would comes with the camera, but you know, it's like an add-on kind of thing. But yeah, otherwise it doesn't bug me at all, because I did not really find a lot of chances to use the flashes anyway. I mostly shoot my images without flash, so that's pretty much okay. The storage on this camera, it takes SD card, it puts it right underneath here with a battery compartment. It's annoying if you're on a video tripod, and talking about tripod, the screw mount is right here rather than in the middle of the part where the lens is. That is actually a downside, as if you're trying to take panorama picture with the camera mounted on the actual tripod with the panoramic accessories, this is really annoying. You can't get a proper panorama picture and stitch it later in post. But it doesn't bug me, as again, I tend to take panorama pictures with DSLRs. But then again, I'm not a big fan of panoramic pictures, so it does not bug me at all. And being a compact camera, again, as I said, I never look at it from a serious point of view, but if I have to be piggy with it, I'd say it could be a little bit more sharper. Like, they could have made the images a little bit sharper when shooting at, let's say, a lower lit condition, and it doesn't need to be like in a bar or something where the pictures need to look nice. But let's say a little bit after sunset, when you still have a little bit of sunlight, but it's not completely dark. What I figured is that the pictures turns out quite soft. You can't really see the detail in the, let's say if you're taking pictures a little bit of like that time after the sunset, there would still be sunlight and there would be a lot of trees. It's nice landscapes and everything. You still see that, okay, there are a lot of trees in front, it's nice landscape, but you can't see the individual leaves like you could see with even entry-level DSLRs or some high-end compacts from both Sony, Nikon, and Canon would be able to see. So that's a little downside, and you know, it's a pity that it's still not that good in low light. The screen itself, it does not articulate, and it does not have a touch screen. I don't mind about it not having the articulating screen, but not having the touch screen is a little bit difficult, as this camera, a lot of times it struggles to focus on the right objects in low light. So if I want to take pictures of the candle or get close up to the food, it sometimes focuses on the background, or a lot of times it would focus on the background, which is really, really annoying. No matter how much you try to play around with the distance and the focusing system in here, tweak it a little, it will try to focus on the background. You can try to use manual focus, but that's really hit and miss, simply because it's not accurate. It's not an accurate focusing ring here. So I wish it would just have a touch screen so I can just poke to focus, or really like tap on certain settings more quickly. It also applies to video. I wish it's like focusing, it would be a touch screen so I could tap on any settings to change it rather than, you know, turn the dials here and here. It's because if I'm recording in the same time and try to adjust these buttons, dials, so on and so forth, it's very, very fiddly. And, you know, the G7 having that touch screen, that's a huge, huge benefit. But talking about the image quality, I really like the image quality of this camera more than my G7. I don't know why, but it just looks a lot happier. But then again, it's a compact camera. It's supposed to look like that, I guess. And I don't know, I never, like, ever since I own my G7, which is for a while now, roughly the same time as this camera, I never really was pleased with the image quality coming out of that camera, apart from the video quality. But if I'm traveling and if I'm filming my travel, I actually prefer filming with this camera a lot more. The newer episode from my travel diary episode that I will be uploading onto my YouTube channel is mostly shot on this camera, apart from the time that when this camera ran out of battery, I then switched to my G7 and my GoPro Hero 4 Black Edition to shoot 4K on those cameras. But otherwise, this camera is pretty much a camera that, you know, has got everything photography wise, and it's definitely a photography first camera than video. I'll talk about that later on in the video. I don't know, everything is just more photography related. If I have to complain about any other things, it would be the ergonomics, well, how they place their buttons, such as their filter and their intelligent auto button here. I think a lot of people have complained about those buttons before. So I'm not going to go through like what they should change it to. And obviously their video recording button, it's really annoying because if I'm doing filming on the street, I don't always want to look into the camera to see which is the record button for the video. So I wish it would actually be somewhere up here more, next to the shutter button maybe, replace it with the IA or the filter button. That would be a lot more convenient place for me so I can just push. Yeah. Otherwise, the battery life on this thing is actually pretty decent. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. I can get through the whole day of shooting with this camera perfectly fine, shooting 4K as well as stills images. Yeah, nothing else to complain about. Moving on to the video side though, it does not have the Cine style, sorry, like the Cine-like D or the Cine-like V, like the higher up Lumix camera would have. So my G7, for example, has the Cine-like D, which is really, really nice. But then again, if I'm traveling, I'm not going to use it that often because I'll just do the color settings in the camera itself. So rather than making it look cinematic, like it was shot for Hollywood or something, just make it more like a real travel and fun video. So it does not have that serious look to it. So I'm fine with it not having Cine-like D on here. There's no mic input. I don't see why they would not put that, as they already have a hot shoe mount here. Like at least add another mic input, mic socket over here so I can mount a microphone or a lavalier mic or just a simple shotgun mic from Rode or any other company, and then just plug into the side here or even here. Even a lot smaller mirrorless cameras, let's say from Canon, actually has mic socket. They managed to fit it inside. That's pretty impressive, but they don't have it on here, so that's a huge downside for me, because the microphone from this camera, you can kind of get away with it, but it's still pretty terrible if you were to ask me. And my G7 definitely has a mic input. It's a much bigger camera, so I don't see any reason why they would not put it in that camera. And it's also more video orientated than this camera, because, you know, most of the displays on here are meant for photography, and if you press the video button, it then takes you into the video settings and everything, and then it crops into the image on the aspect ratio of the video that you set it to, be it with 1080p, 4K, 720, what have you. And talking about pressing for record, this is a super annoying part, because I took it with me to test for my 6th episode of my travel diary. There were a lot of times when I wanted to press record right away after I turn on the camera, but it turns out, you know, the camera just waits a long while, at least like 7 to 8 seconds before I can press record. And let's say if I'm on the metro or on the tram, and if I see a building, you know, that has really nice graffitis on there, I want to press record after I turn it on. You know, by the time the camera allows me to to press record after I turn on, the tram would already pass that building with that really nice graffiti. So that was just, you know, something I just never get used to, because with my G7, I just wait like annoyingly 3 seconds or maybe 2.5 seconds, then I can press record. But with my DSLRs from Canon, you turn it on, well, I just turn the camera on and then press record. That's it. It's just that simple. Whether I'm using my high-end Canon cameras, or if I were to use the lower end, say the 600D even, from a few years ago, entry-level SLR from Canon, if I turn it on and press record, it will just start recording right away. I can't see why they can't do this on this camera. I just don't. It has a fast enough processor. If it can process that RAW plus JPEG images faster than, you know, me pressing the record button, then surely the processing power should be enough to just press record right away, or at least wait 1 or 2 seconds until it can record. Not like between 7 to 8 or even 9 seconds sometimes. That's just not really acceptable out of my opinion. Then there's the electronic viewfinder, which I hardly ever use, simply because it's a compact camera. I find it odd to put it in front of my face like that. But if you're recording in the middle of, let's say, a sunny day in summer, it's very useful at some point, because then you can judge your exposure even better through this viewfinder. That said though, the color is not as vibrant as the color on the screen, so that's the downside, as sometimes you will think, or a lot of times you'll probably think, that you're not getting such a good looking image, but actually you're getting the same image as always. Just that's the viewfinder, the screen, the color of it is just not as pleasing to look at. that. That's all. But the refresh rates, whether you're shooting photos or videos, like the refresh rates is pretty much nice. So it's not very laggy. And on top of that, you have more custom functions button where you can assign them to do other things. And there's another one down here, which is nice. Though I wish there would be another one up here replacing IA button, Intelligent Auto button. But yeah. Otherwise, this camera is a really nice camera, and the image stabilization on this camera actually works really nicely, whether you're zoom in all the way to 75mm or zoom out to the widest end. It works really nicely, and it's something I wish it would be, you know, like on Lumix kit lenses would actually adopt the image stabilization system from this camera, because the stabilization on those lenses are not as good, nowhere as good as from this camera. I tested this out in the bus in a video, so you know how shaky big buses can be when running at really high speed on the expressway, and if you're sitting on the second floor and trying to film, like any bit of movement, the bus tends to shake. So I did a little testing on how good the image stabilization on this, on both the wide end and then at around 50mm and then at the long end, and it turns out to be really nicely controlled. If you're walking with this camera, exploring the city, and if you're trying to walk and film, obviously you'll get a lot of footsteps no matter how good the image stabilization on this camera is. But it definitely eliminates a lot compared to if you were to film it without the image stabilization on. So that's another impressive feature. And this camera, the build quality of it is actually really nice. So it's like metal all around with a bit of plastic here and there. But then again, it comes with this really nice, well, not nice, it comes with this really cheap plastic cover. So it's like they already put a lot of effort into the design and everything, but then they just give us this really cheap plastic cover to put in front of the lens, and it just feels super out of place. And some of the buttons, it just does not feel right. The body design texture-wise, it's nice, just most of the buttons on the back are just like, they could have put a lot more thought into it that would fit the design more, and it would feel more at place rather than this. Apart from that, I think I pretty much cover most of the informations I wanted to cover. Oh, and there's one more thing. The Wi-Fi system on here, it's actually a lot slower to set up than my G7's Wi-Fi. So it took me a while to be able to transfer pictures from this camera to my phone, to my smartphones, compared to my G7 because of the setup. The setup, I just press one button on there and then put my camera on connection, and then boom, it's done. On here, you press one button, then you have to scroll through the Wi-Fi menu, and then it will take a while until everything is set up to be transferred or controlled. But it's nice to have Wi-Fi features on here nonetheless. Other than that, I think I pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover in what I think about this camera. So my conclusion is, you know, it's a pretty good compact camera, and I think I'll take this out more often than carrying my DSLRs. My DSLRs will definitely be with me on my journey to places where I feel like it's worth taking pictures of. It's definitely a new place for me to explore, whereas this will be more like if I'm going to Berlin again, or if I'm going to other cities that I've been there for a few times already and I know that I'll visit that place a lot more later on in life, then I'll just take this camera. Or if I'm hanging out with friends, I'll just take this camera instead of my 7TD or my 5D Mark III in that matter. So like this camera really already, I really got used to this camera already. It's nice and compact. It doesn't hurt my back. It doesn't hurt my shoulder. I barely notice it when I'm carrying it around, simply because I got used to the weight of my DSLRs. So yeah, it's just a nicer all-around package. It also takes brilliant looking videos. It doesn't have the cine-like profiles, but I don't mind on a compact camera. The lens definitely has a good range to it. I have to admit that my favorite focal length on DSLRs is 16 to 35. So this doesn't go all the way down to 16 millimeters, but I'm not complaining because it's a compact camera. I don't know, this camera got me, well, like, I forgive it for like a lot of, like, I forgive this camera a lot of times because of it's a compact camera. I don't know why. Is that really acceptable? Because with my G7 being an interchangeable camera system, I tend to always get frustrated and expected it to do a lot more than it can, and sometimes I'm pushing that camera a bit too far. But maybe it's just how I look at different cameras in a different perspective, in a different way. But yeah, this camera, it's definitely good for anyone who would like to, you know, take some really, really nice pictures on their vacation and take some really, really nice videos, or document a lot of things, maybe family travels or family events, things like that. This camera is definitely good for it. Yeah, and apart from that, I can't really find other things to complain about. The digital zoom, not the digital zoom, the zoom lever here for the lens is also really nice. I tried zooming in and out with my G7 lenses, but it just does not work properly, like smoothly. At least with DSLRs, with my Canon DSLRs, there's L lenses which has buttery smooth zoom ring that I can actually zoom nicely and sometimes trick the view to look more like that it was zoom with a proper zoom lever. But on the lenses that's produced by Panasonic and Olympus, none of them actually has such a great zooming experience if you're coming from, you know, zoom lenses from like professional Nikon zoom lenses and professional Canon zoom lenses, where they're zoom lenses. Most of them actually has really nice and buttery feel to it that you can zoom, like properly zoom with a camera. But yeah, that's it. That has been the video of this camera. Like what I thought, like my thoughts towards this camera. And how I kind of compare it with that camera. So yeah, sorry about that. My G7 just suddenly stopped recording, so I just had to press record again. But yeah, otherwise, this camera is a really, really nice camera. I would recommend it to anyone, actually. If you don't mind about the 12 megapixel, it's actually not a bad thing. If you're only posting it on Instagram, Facebook, it's more than enough. 12 megapixel, even 5 megapixels is more than enough for Instagram and Facebook. Again, 4K recording is only a little bit over 8 megapixels, so, you know, it's nothing bad to have 12 megapixel image uploaded onto your website or social network. As long as if you're not gonna do a big poster print, that's totally fine. And overall, I really, really like this camera. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more of the videos from this very camera, and as well as my G7, then you can watch my travel diary videos. It's episode 6, it's the one to Berlin. It will also have the footage from my GoPro, but you'll definitely see the difference between all three cameras because the colors are different, and especially from GoPro, it's definitely softer, not as sharp, and it has a bit of fisheye look to it. Yeah. And that's pretty much the video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a nice day. I do hope that my opinion helped somewhat if you're deciding to buy this camera or not still here in 2016, or you know, if you're deciding to buy the G7 or this camera. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and have a nice day.